much, and it's really brilliant to be able to speak today to the creative team for Cece's Speakeasy. Thank you so much for taking the time, especially as you're in the middle of your run here at the Albany. So I'll quickly just go through who we are joined by today. We've got artistic director Zena Edwards, a poet, performer, and climate activist who uses song, movement, and global influences as a jump-off for her words. Next to her, we have one of the performers for the show, the Repeat Beat poet, so PJ, a hip-hop poet and broadcaster, fusing traditional poetics and hip-hop culture to capture and extend moments of time, thought, and feeling. And PJ has performed across the UK and internationally. And then we've got Eric Apapule, so born in East London to Mauritian parents, musical director Eric Apapule is a composer and self-taught multi-instrumentalist whose passion for guitar started at age 8, and he's worked internationally since the age of 19. And then we have designer Paul Burgess, an East London-based set, costume and video designer and sustainability campaigner. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I'll say a little about the show. So, as global temperatures rise, the quality and quantity of our crops decreases. In the not-so-distant future, coffee bean production will halt, caffeine will become extinct. By 2050, there will be no more chocolate. So step forward into 2031 and welcome to Cece's Speakeasy, a place for truth seekers, chocolate lovers, and coffee drinkers. Described as a place for the people, a night of entertainment, and here storytellers, poets, and musicians share new work exploring hope and action during the climate emergency. It sounds really exciting. How are you all doing? How's the show been going so far? Should we go to you, Zena?
It's been amazing. I have to say that at times I find it very, very hard to describe how I feel about it because I'm right in the thick of it right now. And it just feels like a heartbeat. Like it feels like food, it feels like nourishment. And everybody's invested in the most authentic way as well. So the show feels really authentic and genuine. So I feel the audience are having a really authentic journey when it comes to hearing the themes, experiencing the music, listening to the stories, hearing the words. So it's an exciting show. Very, very excited.
Amazing.
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling like more immersed in it with every night that goes. And so sometimes I'm getting lost within the thing and then I have to snap myself back and be like, oh, I actually have to be like on stage and doing this now. But it's so immersive, and it really has been like a wonderful process getting to where we are now. And I know that the next stage of what this is all going to be is also going to be great. So, yeah, feeling good.
Yeah, likewise. I was saying to Zena earlier because we've been driving in together, so we get a good half an hour to chat before we get in. I said, how you feeling? How you feeling, Zena? I said, how you feeling, Eric? Actually, you know what? It's been one of the best experiences over 2 months and more so, of my life, because I get to create music, we get to play, and the musicians bring it to life. The poets, we've been working closely with the poets. The words are coming to life, to integrating with the music, and it's just like a big family party. That's how I see it. So just having a great time.
Yeah. I mean, likewise, it's brilliant. It was kind of the actual tickets went on sale because of COVID. It was all quite intense. Tickets went on sale, and it was all go. And you kind of have, for me, as experience, you design the set sort of in isolation, and then there's a moment, I think for me, when all this huge amount of equipment started appearing on stage, and suddenly the stage started becoming alive, and then Wednesday there's people in here as well, and it just kind of, there's all these stages of kind of like different stages in an insect or something, and now it's alive and amazing, so yeah, very happy.
It's interesting to describe it as different stages of insects. Like, what has the evolution been of the project? So, Zena, you might be able to tell us about the starting point of this.
Well, basically, I had this poem where I talk about 2027 and thinking about babies. And it's like a couple who are like having a moment, like, should we really continue the human race? Should we have children if the future seems so bleak? So the poem was actually set in the future. And I opened the poem by saying, the coffee is good and strong, but, the crops are almost gone. And then me and Lisa were having a chat about that whole concept, about like the crops being gone. And then she phoned me and said, I've got an idea. It's called Cece's. I'm like, okay. It's like, yeah, Cece's 2 degrees. What would happen if all the chocolate and the coffee was extinct? We should make a Bugsy Malone for adults. And it would be like a prohibition of chocolate and coffee. So we were just like, it was just like a fun tumbling of ideas, just brainstorming and tumbling ideas and just imagining and envisioning. And then the next thing, we're going to do this. We're going to have funding. We're going to make it happen. So all the stages were, I think we had lots of space to do it, lots of room. And I think that's important because we don't often have that with projects. Sometimes it's like, you have the inception of the idea, then you've got 3 weeks to write it, and then 3 weeks to rehearse, and then it's up and running. But this has had a really nice incubation period. It was supposed to happen in November, and then lockdown happened again. The restrictions dropped down again, so we had to rethink how we were going to do it. And it's happening now. And in that space in time, the right people came together as well, because it got a little bit tricky just in terms of diaries and stuff like that. But suddenly it all just kind of fell together, and now we're here and we're in it. And all the stages of the piece coming together, like we had to put the emerging artists who are in the activist space. There's an activist space that people come into before they actually walk into Cece's proper. Like all of these different spaces that we wanted to create so that we are developing an immersive experience, as PJ said, for the audience. We have to prime them. So I had to think about, for myself as the artistic director, I had to think about how do I prime an audience when I create my poetry set. Like I have particular poems in a particular order, so that I know that I'm like, okay, get used to my voice, get used to my vibe, and then I will go for the meat and potatoes. Go for the jugular. That's it. So that's what we kind of did. There's a very clear journey that we want the audience to go on, so that when they leave light and in a thoughtful place, and not hopeful in that kind of cheesy kind of way, but just like really recognizing that the human race is on a journey in its own right, and we don't have to be so doom and gloom about things. We just have to trust our hearts. We have to trust our ability to innovate and be resilient. That the planet's going to save itself. It has no problem just coughing and shaking us off. It's us having to save ourselves and us having to save the human species and survive this climate crisis that we've got right now. And I think we can do that through art, through sharing love, through sharing creativity, through inspiring people's imaginations. And that's what this show is supposed to do. It's just a little kind of like a cocoon for people to just like think things through, feel things through, and using music and poetry and storytelling as the provocation to do that.
Amazing. I can't wait to watch it myself and to be a part of it. How did you go about researching for Cece's Speakeasy? Did you look at how speakeasies worked in the past? How did you create this world also without chocolate, without coffee, without all of these things that we love?
I don't see... you can ask the others this, because I think people are always going to love stories. They're going to always love coming together. They're always going to love music, and they're always going to love things that create memories. And chocolate creates memories. We all love an Easter egg. We all remember our first days with chocolate and stuff like that. So I think it's about memory creation, and that's never going to go away. So it wasn't difficult to imagine that this kind of thing is still going to be happening. It will be happening underground. It might not have all these fancy lights and everything, but there's always going to be people gathering, always. So, how will people feel about it? Especially for you, PJ.
Yeah, so talking about research, I was, so the way I did a lot of my research was over the past month, I've been in residency at the Library of Africa and the African Diaspora in Accra in Ghana. And so I was actually out there for a month. I was lucky to be awarded that residency, but during that time, I spent a lot of time researching the ecological systems and systems of industrial agricultural production that are involved around mainly cocoa production in Ghana, obviously, second largest cocoa producer in the world. And it's a really important thing to know about, because as we've discussed, if the ways we are producing crops and the ways we are doing like farming across the world, if they continue alongside the ecological breakdown of systems, then we do end up with a world without like the things that we love. And then the history of this is so interesting as well. He's not here on the panel, but Anthony Joseph's piece, during that he goes through just like, you know, not direct, but from like the 1520s through to like the 1800s, just tells you the history of a couple of very specific crops of cocoa. And it's fascinating. I was like linking that up with a lot of the research I was doing in a place about a place called the Etowah Forest region, which is like a mountain forest region in Ghana, and it basically provides the water and so many. It's like a big ecological like hotspot in terms of West African like basically mountain forest regions. Lots of endemic species, like the largest butterflies in Africa are found here, like the swallowtail. They're like huge, and lots of all this really fascinating stuff, but it's in danger of mining, and so that's like bauxite mining, which is the pre-stage for like aluminium production, gold mining, logging, pollution, and obviously that has just a feedback loop. And it was kind of, I was looking at this place as a microcosm of what is happening, what has happened, what will happen if things don't change. And so then it was easy for me to then extrapolate sort of to create and live in this world and then write that into a piece for the first half of the show. So that's kind of where my research intertwined. And it was fascinating. It was like, yeah, it was like eye-opening, and I'm still constantly still reading this stuff. Like it's not just for the show. Like it is kind of, I feel like it sparked a new interest in this stuff for me. So, yeah.
It's interesting. You say, for me, researching, I had a conversation with Zena when I first was asked to join the project. And she said to me, okay, can you imagine the journey of the coffee seed to the coffee cup? So where do you see it? Can you, I don't know, I'm just going to throw that out there. What can you give me musically? I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Well, okay. So I looked on Google, all the coffee creating countries, producing countries. So I ended up with Brazil, Ghana, Trinidad, Jamaica. And I thought, why don't we take a journey? Started in Cuba, the first piece of the show. And then we get to the Caribbean, we get to Ghana, we get to Madagascar. And because Mauritius is very close to Madagascar, so I thought, yeah, I've got to get as close to Mauritius as I can and influence the music. So, and then we come back to Rio. We end in a big, massive Rio Carnival. That was in my mind anyway. And it kind of actually does do that in the show now. And I was really happy that actually this shape still stayed the same somehow, because it got shifted around. I was like, okay, it's not about me, is it? It's not about this. Just a vision. But it spurred. For me, it spurred the journey musically, and I had to research Cuba, music from Cuba, music from Rio, music from Ghana, music from Madagascar. So it opened my ears to those countries. And then we went into Ethiopia with Jan's story. I was like, wow. So then I said, well, I'm not really familiar with Ethiopia, so I studied it a little bit. And then Wesley, our drummer, he said, no, I play in an Ethiopian band. This is the vibe. I was like, yeah, give me. Show me. So he showed me the Ethiopian angle. So, we're all feeding off each other. And then Isabella on bass, she said, I've got a drive full of 1,000 Brazilian, Cuban, salsa. I said, yeah, send it. So she sent me that. So basically my ears are starting to open up to the many different variations in, because Zena also said, we want to kind of connect West Africa with South America. So that was the first. And I thought, well, okay, I could see the plane going across, and let's go via Jamaica and Trinidad as well. Because Izzy said, "What about Trinidad?" Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's on the list. Cool. So this journey, this global journey for me musically, opened up my ears, and then the band just brought it to life. And then we, over the 2-month process of working workshops, we kind of, I don't know, it's just like a amalgamation of all the talents come together, and all the genres. So very happy.
Great. Cool.
I suppose the biggest lot of research that fed into this was that over lockdown period, I focused on sustainable theatre design, working with the Society of British Theatre Designers and a group called Eco Stage and various other things, and that sort of became, didn't particularly plan it that way. I thought I'd have a nice rest, but it ended up becoming a massive lockdown project. And so a lot of that, and this is the first project I've worked on since doing all that. So this is kind of fed into a lot of this design. So I would say that feels like a really big lump of research. And then, but a lot of the other stuff is about being responsive, I think. So the visuals, I didn't really plan anything until I had read or read drafts or actually heard in real life what the poets were doing. So everything was a response to the poetry, for example. So yeah, and I mean, and the other thing was just trying to, well, COVID stuff, of course, was another big factor that shaped it all. I don't know if that counts as research, but certainly having to learn what those rules were. Yeah, I think that's that kind
amazing.
of
We'll come back to the set in just a second. I want to just come back to the sort of collaboration and this like musical journey for a second. How did you sort of create this fusion and this sort of this fusion between the poetry as well as the music? What was the process with that? And maybe Eric.
Yeah. Well, as I tried to sleep that night, after I got the phone call, I couldn't get to sleep. So I was thinking, what am I going to do? Am I the person for this job? Can I deliver? Because I was asked commissioned to write 3 pieces of music as well. So then anyway, 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I'm hearing dum 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 dum. Pick up my phone. First thing I do, in your subconscious is the best time to capture your creativity because there's no criticism, the logical mind is not involved, it's purely from another place. So I'll get my phone and record it, try not to wake the family. So all these melodies are coming out, these beats, and I'm like, hang on, this is something going on here. So I recorded it and it lasted for 10 minutes or something. So and then I couldn't sleep. I said, I might as well go in the studio. I've got a studio in my garage. So I put it into the computer and literally put beats to it, put piano to it, put guitar to it, whatever. And if you unmute the recording, it's still there underneath the demos that I created. So I created this 8-minute piece, which is the finale piece now. So, and then the other pieces were born from that, but via the journey through Jamaica, through Ghana. So that was the pinnacle piece for me that created it. And I was thinking the journey from the coffee seed to the coffee cup. So bearing that in mind the whole time, that kind of inspired me to travel with the coffee and try and capture as many different, vibes as possible.
And I think I had a lot of faith in Eric being able to deliver the music in that respect, but there's also the whole conversation between spoken word and poetry. So for me, spoken word poetry is it's very musical in its own right. So it's about how does the music and the spoken word performed have a dialogue with each other and hit some very tough themes that we're talking about. I mean, I realised that the question previously was about research, and I'm talking about survival of the human race. However, I mean,
same thing.
Same thing. But I mean, ultimately, for me, because some of the themes are so embedded in me because of the work that I've done, like we're talking about modern day slavery. PJ's piece goes in, talk about modern day slavery, the deforestation, the real disasters. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, how do I, with my activist head on, communicate to the band and communicate to the team, the poets as well, and Jan, that we have to tell this story, but we can't be bashing people over the head with the politics of it, but the politics has to be imbued all the way through. Every time you're taking a sip of that coffee, like what if it was the last sip of coffee that I take? What happens to the families who are the coffee producers who, if the climate does get above the 2 degrees and everything goes, the coffee and coffee beans and cocoa does go extinct, what's going to happen to them? How are they going to have a livelihood? How's it going to affect their culture? Some people have coffee and chocolate as part of cultural ritual. what's going to happen to the folks who are producing, who refine the chocolate? What's going to happen to the sugar industry? Because the sugar industry also supported the cocoa, the rise of cocoa being popular to the privileged palate, shall we say, when it first came back centuries ago. But my thing was like, we have to hit all of these important points, and it has to be done beautifully. How do you make it beautiful? Maybe we shouldn't make it beautiful, but we have Amira, who unfortunately, she's in New York, but she sent us a gorgeous film that enables us to really get immersed in like, what decisions are we on an individual level making about our consciousness around climate and environmental justice issues. And on top of that, how do we make it so that it's not just the individual thing that you do? We have to work together as a collective, because sometimes with climate justice or environmental justice activism work, it kind of focuses on the individual, but we have to look at issues around race, we have to look around issues around class, we have to talk about those things and have some systemic change. We can't just talk about the individual, there has to be systemic change. I want all of that in this show. How are we going to make it happen beautifully, without trying to smooth it over and trivialize it and make it something nice? It's got to be beautiful, it's got to be moving, it's got to be thought-provoking. So working with the poets was really, I really enjoyed that part of it, because I was able to help them to get deep into their work and look at the musicality, but also look at the meaning and storytell, just talk to people, don't just perform. Talk to the people,
And that's a really important lesson for climate justice activism as well, is to talk to people and to make it make sense in their everyday lives as well.
Can I interject there? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
When you said about talking to people, it's a conversation. So the conversation is between the poets and the musicians. So we are literally listening to every word and trying to reflect and react, but underscore it in a way that makes it feel, more thought-provoking, I guess. You know what I mean? So it's a conversation.
It's dialogue, ultimately. And I think there's not enough spaces where dialogue is actually moving the conversation forward. I find I go to a lot of spaces that are around, whether it's to do with anti-blackness or climate issues, and there's a lot of stock responses. A lot of people, it feels like people are reading from scripts that they've had from a long time ago. So how do we culture jam that? How do we jam that conversation and say, let's make room for something new? And we've got fresh voices. So the intergenerational conversation is really important. So the young poets who are in the activist space, they're the ones that actually bring the fire in the belly, but also they're not tainted yet. They still bring the freshness and new ideas that we all had back in the day.
Let's keep it that way.
Do you know what I mean? Like we all had the idea back in the day, and then we got sort of like, it doesn't really work because the system's so powerful. Like the system is powerful, but so are we. And that's what we have to keep reminding people when we do this show.
It's got to be really collective, doesn't it, in order to maintain that power and to maintain that energy. And when you're talking about it being beautiful as well, the space itself is really lovely. So, Paul, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you created this space, but also how you did that with everything that we've been having to, all the restrictions around COVID, as well as thinking about sustainability within the production.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the COVID stuff is relatively straightforward. I mean, there's a limit on audience numbers. People are quite spread out, and that we had a lot less flexibility than we'd normally have. And if performers wanted to go off the stage, that all had to be really carefully worked out. And in some cases, we couldn't do stuff that some of the performers wanted to do. But that side of things was kind of quite clear in a way, I suppose. In terms of creating a space, we wanted a space that felt, cozy and welcoming, that was kind of had this sense of living in a kind of slightly reduced world without going Mad Max, but also just functioned. It would be inappropriate to create a set that dominated that got in the way of the poetry and the stories and the music. So, I think that was quite important as well. From a sustainability point of view, I tried to use... So I think it's really important to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, particularly with design, because that's where the production uses most its stuff. Design in the broader sense, so the use of electricity and so on, but as well. So a lot of the design was dictated by what we could get that was either in the building, so trying to use the architecture of the building rather than build something new. What we could get from salvage, so all the wood is from Salvage Yard in Croydon. A lot of other things are borrowed or adapted. The lights are all water bottles, using the water, there's a kind of water bottle light that gets used in places with no electricity, which diffracts the sunlight. So we've used that. So actually one bulb isn't working at the moment, but should be, instead of however many 50-something bulbs across those, whatever it is, I can't remember, there's 2 bulbs in that and 1 bulb in that. So we're doing things that can, and that was exciting from a design. Do you know what I mean? That wasn't a restriction. That was a really positive, exciting thing. And so it's finding those thinking about the paint, how to do this with, so water-based paint, and then the idea of stenciling patterns from coffee-producing countries. So everything's followed on from trying to sort of square making something sustainably. And it's not perfect in lots of ways, but doing what we can practically within budget and time. Trying to square that with trying to serve the performance. That's the formula.
You have to do it in record time as well.
And we had to work very quickly. Yeah, that's another thing, because of course, if we're trying to be sustainable, that means being sustainable with people too, and theatre has this culture of just burning everyone out, and that is not just, and that is not right. So finding ways of working as well that were. There's an associate designer, Carly Brownbridge, as well, who stepped in and did a lot of stuff. And sort of working out what the right team is and how to share the work is a really important part of this too. And the team here, all the people that have been working on it, creating that, having that team effort and checking in on each other and everything is all part of that that design, that kind of commitment to sustainable design, I think.
And with it being such an immersive experience, how have audiences responded to the Speakeasy? PJ, would you like to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, okay. Audience response and immersion. Okay, because I think that people haven't had shows to come to in however long. People are very willing to do that maybe extra bit of suspension of disbelief, but it's not just about suspending disbelief of like what's going on, it's about immersion in something, and that's the world in which we've created as using the skills that we have. And so I think people respond to it really strongly because the show's hardwired to do that, like politically, musically, in like a theoretical sense, but also in a kind of in an emotional sense, because it's a fully, we're trying to be as immersive in as many ways as possible within like the situation that we're creating, which involves a lot of like different steps and stages. Just on a granular level, the words that we're using, like the concepts that we're constantly evoking, things like reciprocity, things like sustainability, things like effective balance, like holistic worldviews, which aren't based on, like, for want of a better phrase, capitalist, individualist, greedy production, and, all of the waste that produces. All of this is linked to, like, colonialism, and linked to imperialism, and linked to, like, the odd ways in which the world has been structured for the past 400 odd years, just who we value, what we value, and how we, like, interact with each other, where power is and power relations. We're trying to, or I'm trying to, in the words, specifically just talking about my pieces here, it's a contrast between like an apocalyptic vision and then a partially utopian vision, an ecological kind of sanctuary world where things are like in balance. And to do that, I had to be like, right, what's actually happened? Where are we? And where could we be based on what's happening? And I think, hopefully, people respond to that. Like people understand, like I say, because they're willing to do that extra bit of suspension of disbelief. They understand the types of scope we're trying to go for here, because it is as big as the world ending, because the world is ending. Like, there isn't a plan B in terms of a planet B. Like, Bezos and Musk and Branson might fly off, and like Tribe Called Quest had a song called The Space Program, and it was like, there ain't no space program. There ain't no space program for N-words, because we're stuck here. And it's a constant idea in the history of lots of black music, from funk, like, and the P-funk thing of like, oh, what's going to happen when the rich people, the people with power, fly off into space and leave everybody else who doesn't have power and burn the planet as they go. And I think people might get a tiny bit of that when we get into some funky music in this section. There's some bass lines that Isabella Burnham rips through that are phenomenal. Yeah, so I think people are immersed in it. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I also think that the whole idea of lockdown, or just the whole thing of COVID and the whole, the second wave of Black Lives Matter, I think people just want something more than just entertainment. You know, they want food, they want nourishing as well, but they also don't want their intelligence patronized anymore. I think people want intelligent work a lot more now, just on a normal level, just for basic level. Yeah, we can also like switch on the TV and switch off when we want to, but I think when you come out and you want to you're coming out and you're paying to see work, you really want to see something that's got some substance to it. I think people are hungry for that now. I know I am, personally.
Well, I was going to say, when you walk in here, it's like, because we're not allowed to hug, you're being hugged as soon as you walk in. As soon as you leave, you're hugged. For me, that's how it feels when I walk in. So every face that I see, I can't actually physically hug, but musically and words and chocolate. Chocolate. So you get hugged by the chocolate. It doesn't chocolate hug you anyway when it's cold outside. So we're getting hugged by all this. I haven't tasted the mole yet, so today I'm going to taste
really
it.
nice.
And get another extra hug
chicken
from the
mole is some ancient Mexican dish where it's cooked in cocoa. It's not chocolate, so people don't think chocolate on top. I know that's what everybody says, but I think, remember, it's a spice in its own right as well. You know, it's not just, we only know chocolate with loads of sugar in it, but it's actually very bitter. So it becomes like it's really nice. That's all I can say. It's really nice. They've done a great job. Lily did a great job in the kitchen with yeah, it was a good idea that we got that. By the way, I have to point to this lady over here. She's being shy. She probably won't want to be on camera, but Lisa Mead has been amazing in bringing this show together. And you need props, and you should be up here as far as I'm concerned. You need lots and lots of props for your hard work as well. Just making it happen, doing all the juggling. And when we say, can we have this? No. Okay, here you go. You know, it's that kind of thing. So like always puffing up the chain.
Piece. Go, Lisa.
Yeah, we've got a piece coming up for Lisa soon. But Lisa Mead, please remember that name as well.
Thanks, Lisa. And I guess, following on from that, I quite often hear things, our audiences don't care about things that are really far away, or and I think it's really important to remember that people don't want to be patronized, people don't want to be condescended, they want to see beautiful art, but they are smart enough to know what is being said as well and to understand it, and it's really important.
It's interesting because whenever I write a piece of music, or I consider writing a piece of music, or somebody, something's coming from somewhere else, wherever it comes from, one day I just realized, hang on a minute, I think music should stimulate every part, not just the feet, not just the head, but the heart, the body. So you should be able to move to it, you should be able to understand what the concept, the lyrical content is about, and the emotional content, the spiritual, it's a holistic, music should be a holistic experience. So whenever I try to write a piece of music, I always have that in mind. Maybe it's in the back of my mind, but it's always like, I want people to dance to this, but I want people to listen to it too, and I want people to feel something, and I want people to have a memory from when they got married or when they had their first child or when they first went to school, whatever it is, it's going to inspire a memory or inspire I want to write that song that I've never written before because that's it's so simple. It's 3 chords. Why can't I? It's like anyone can, if they really had a dream to be a musician or a singer or a songwriter or a poet or whatever, they'll come to this space and they'll be like, wow. And look at the youngsters. They're only 22, 25. I had to check their ID yesterday, just let them in the building. It's like, so, are you sure you're 25? She's tiny, but she's coming up with stuff that I would never understood as at that age. I still don't understand at my age, but she's coming up with stuff and like, where's that coming from? Wow, you know what I mean?
So just on that, to kind of build, to link 2 big ideas that I think are influencing this show. There's a concept of musicking, so not just like the act of playing music, but that's the act of experiencing music and everyone coming together to create the experience of music. Because, I mean, up until, the late 1800s, we didn't have recordings. Like, in the same way, we couldn't record and replay sounds. So if you weren't physically there, then it didn't, to all intents and purposes, exist in the same way. You might have heard it from some time. So there's that, and I think that's part of what like an immersive experience kind of like feels like. And it's a different sort of immersion from a very like a sort of a more operatic setting or like a large theatre where it's like, banks and banks of seats and people are individually sitting there kind of experiencing it only an individual thing. We want to create like a participatory like experience, and I think that's really important. That's part of what Eric's saying about a full body thing where music affects you in that way. And then bringing that onto effectively and back to like an ecological understanding of the world that we need to inhabit more to sort of offset capitalist production, the way in which we teach each other the ways that we can relate to the world that are more harmonious in terms of just like, so this is simple things like, farming and just like how effectively we use the land and not overproducing and like dealing with waste and all of these sorts of things. We teach these through rituals and myths and stories that are participatory experiences. It's like, I was reading papers on all of this, but it's a link between keeping an actually grounded experience in the land that we're in and having like a sense of place and like hyperlocality where the land around you and you have a relationship with it. Like if you're gardening, for instance, you have a relationship with a patch of land, you have a relationship with these plants, and it's reciprocal. They give you something, you give something back in terms of your work in the land. You get, the incredible things we get, coffee and chocolate. And I think that we're trying to do these 2 things, musicking with an ecological understanding and giving that to people as like an experience that they can be a part of.
So we've talked about all of that, about the sort of resources that you've drawn on to create Cece's. What are the resources that you as artists personally have to draw on in order to be able to do this? It can be really difficult, talking about climate injustices and talking about this future kind of world, which isn't necessarily a very pleasant world. And, you talked about that difference between the apocalyptic versus the utopic visions. How do you, as artists, keep going and keep that sort of hope alive?
It's interesting. We get bombarded with so much how awful everything is. We also get blamed all the time for being a rubbish species. And I just don't believe that. There's a lot of beauty in the world. I think it's been knocked into my head a few times. There's an artist called Theaster Gates, visual artist. He said, beauty is a human right? So we have to preserve it. And there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of love. It's here in this space. There's individuals who are out there who are spreading, there's natural poets out there, natural storytellers who are just on the corner, who, you can go out to Deptford, you can meet a bunch of them. And that's where creativity and the vitality or the fire of that's in our bellies as a species is alive. And I think that we need to amplify that part, because we're constantly bombarded with how your identity is formulated by the stuff that you own or the status that you have, when it's not actually. It's our connection with each other. That's why we work so hard to create a family environment in the space where everybody feels held and supported, and we extend that to the audience. So for me, I know that my belief in that is what sustains me. No matter how hard it gets, I'm just like, well, I've had worse than this. And I know some lovely people who are just going to shower me with a little bit of love, and I'll be cool. And I think it's cheesy and as hippie as it sounds, we have to focus on our hearts, we have to focus on our intuition, our gut and our belly, that animal instincts that knows how to survive and thrive, and we just have to share the love. It's really, it doesn't get any simpler than that for me. It really doesn't. And we make sure, and I make sure that I kind of bring that every day. I try to bring that every day, no matter how hard it gets. And there's always somebody who I can call who I know has got that vibe as well. So from a creative or an artist perspective, art for me is a spiritual experience as well. The act of creating is a reflection of creation. Nature's doing it every day. So I'm definitely very inspired by the planet, by Earth, by nature, by the elements. I'm inspired by that. We shouldn't be afraid of death, for a start, because it makes space for new life. So there's those kinds of concepts that are going round and round in my brain when I come to work. And it really is as simple as that, for me personally. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, music always brings people together. It has always, from the beginning of time, and it always will to the end of time. I mean, there will be no end of time. In my mind, we're going to be here forever. But so for me, music is always... when I came out of... not came out of lockdown, but when I went to perform at my first gig after not performing for a whole year and a half or whatever it was. Not even perform, I was watching a gig. I did one song, I came off and I was watching the others and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And it was so, you could hear a pin drop because everyone hadn't heard live music in so long. It was like the best experience of at that moment. It's like, wow, this is like amazing. And everyone was so encouraging to the performers. They were unknown performers doing their own material. So there were different age, demographics. So, but everyone was so supportive, and it felt like a family. So it's like it's post lockdown. I've got a piece called Post Lockdown Party, which is the final piece, and I want to encourage, as much as I'm allowed to, the audience to get involved and sing. Then somebody said to me, "You're not allowed to sing." I said, "What? They're not allowed to sing?" Say what? And I was like, surely, I'm not going to use the words I used at that conversation on this mic because it's not going to be right. But I was bewildered. It was unbelievable to me because I just couldn't grasp the concept. So somehow we need to get everybody involved on the last song because we're supposed to be in Rio Carnival in my mind, because every day for me is a party. Any opportunity for a party, I'm there. So, and if I haven't got an instrument, I'll find an instrument. You know what I mean? Let's have a party. You know what I mean?
What?
So,
bringing the party to the movement.
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah. So, creatively, I think, the political aspect of theatre is, I can't remember a time, even as a child, when I wasn't quite political and bothered by like my parents recently found a newspaper cutting of me saving pocket money to plant trees, and that, it's just always been going on. But I think with theatre, the collaborative nature of theatre I find really important. And also, I see my job as a designer as essentially creating frames for things to happen. I see that as a very artistic, creative role, but it's still fundamentally about creating frames, and that can enable really interesting ideas to sort of take hold, or it can enable people to, particularly in something like this where there's quite a lot of freedom and it's not sort of all heavily choreographed and scripted from kind of one writer's brain months or years before it happens, where it's really collaborative, then creating that space becomes really, really important. And for me, that is, it sounds pretentious, but I would say that is an aspect of my politics, doing that and trying to get that right. So, that's my answer.
Amazing. And PJ?
I'll keep it really simple. What keeps me going this week? Bolognese. I love bolognese. And it's been good food. Now, that's why... What keeps me going is, like, despite being a cynic, having hope. Like, despite, you know, knowing the depths of what we face and the gravity of the situation, just having hope and feeling good and taking the time to find joy and peace where I can. And a lot of that is in good food, comfort food. I love bolognese. I really do.
Food for the stomach and for the soul. Thank you all so much. That was a really great conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Albany, where we are. It's a really beautiful building in Deptford, and to Apples and Snakes and to Season for Change. I'm really excited to watch the show this evening. Good luck with the rest of your run.
You're going to have such a good time. Yeah, it's going to be such a good time.
This is my first outing. So.
Well, you're going to enjoy the phenomenal roster of artists and musicians and poets and the lighting and the sets and all of the experiences that we offer. It's wonderful down at Cece's Speakeasy. You should come through.
Agreed.
Hey.
Agreed. Whoop, 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 Cece.
Go Cece's.
Go Cece's. Go Cece's. Go Cece's. Go Cece's. Go Cece's. Go Cece's.
Give it to me. Give it to me. One time. Give it to me. One time. Give it to me. Two times. Give it to me. 3 times. Give it to me. 4 times. See you there.
Hey.
Much better ending than I would have